Starving, eating grass instead of rice, dog soup instead of meat, drinking cheap alcohol and living with no fun. Is this what life in North Korea actually looks like? Let's break the myths. Annyeong, I'm Lisa and welcome to Chosun Chronicles. In this video I'll break down on some of the most common stereotypes about North Korea. Some are true, some are half true, and others are just myths shaped by how closed off the country is. But before we start, a quick disclaimer. What I'm sharing here comes from my personal experience living in North Korea and years of studying the country. But North Korea is highly controlled society, and no one, especially outsiders, can claim to know everything about the country. So my perspective may differ from those of others who have been there or from North Koreans themselves. So if you're ready, let's dive in. A very common stereotype about North Korea is that people there are constantly starving, with grass being the only food they can access. But is that true? Well, as usual, there will be no simple yes or no here. Let's start with what we do not see today. There are no clear signs of famine in North Korea, despite several speculations that many North Koreans died of starvation during COVID-19 border closures. Nevertheless, it would also be inaccurate to say that most people in North Korea have stable access to food or consume enough meals per day. So where does this common assumption come from? It traces back to the devastating famine of the 1990s, which drew international attention to the North Korean humanitarian crisis. The North Korean government refers to this time as the Arduous March, a period of extreme hardship and hunger. The famine was caused by a combination of factors: the collapse of the plant economy, a twofold decline in electricity and industrial production, a subsequent halt in fertilizer production, irrigation failures, all of which destroyed agricultural output. On the top of that, as I explained in my video on North Korean women and market economy, disastrous flooding in 1995 and 1996 and a drought in 1997 significantly worsened the situation and pushed the country into catastrophe. Estimates of the death toll of this famine vary widely. Some international organizations put it around 2-3 million, though these numbers may be exaggerated to attract global aid and bring more support to the country. The North Korean government, on the other hand, reported just 250,000 deaths, a number that also seems unreliable. But experts who analyze census data estimate the real figure lies between 500,000 and 600,000 deaths, which could account for about 2% of the population. Still, horrific loss of life. Okay, let's return to the present. What do we have now? North Korea remains under heavy sanctions and has almost no foreign trade opportunities. COVID-19 only deepened its isolation. Internally, outdated farming infrastructure, low investment, climate-related disasters, and strict control over food distribution all contributing to chronic food insecurity. Despite pledges by Kim Jong-un and the government to improve nutrition, the food shortage in North Korea persists. According to a recent UN report on human rights in the DPRK, about 45.5% of the population is malnourished. That's nearly 12 million people out of an estimated population of 26 million, which is roughly half of South Korea's. If these numbers are correct, nearly half of the country's citizens do not consume enough food, and the reality may be even worse. However, it's important to clarify once again, there is no famine in North Korea right now. Even if we hear reports, often from anonymous sources, about starvation in rural areas during the spring planting season, these do not indicate a nationwide famine. You might have heard that rural citizens are barely eating one meal a day, especially during spring season. That's because North Korea is now in its annual barley hamp, a period between planting and harvest when food reserves run low and people must wait for fresh corn crops in August or September. This period always sees more reports of hardship and hunger, especially outside Pyongyang. But why is it important to discuss malnutrition in the context of North Korea? Just because malnutrition does not mean only hunger. It also worsens public health. It increases vulnerability to diseases like tuberculosis, complicates childbirth and maternity, and affects child development. And one of the less obvious but very telling effects of chronic undernourishment is height. In 2005, the average height of a North Korean man between 20 and 40 years old was just 160.2 centimeters, about 5 or 6 centimeters shorter than South Koreans, who averaged 165.8 centimeters. And the gap has only grown since that. In 2022, South Korean men in their 30s averaged 174.7 centimeters, while North Korean men of the same age group stood at just 165 centimeters. But before the division, Koreans who lived in the northern part of the Korean peninsula were 2-3 centimeters taller than those who lived in the south. The difference isn't due to genetics. Genetically, the two populations are virtually identical. The main factor behind the high gap is nutrition. While North Koreans rely heavily on grains and have limited access to protein, South Koreans have been consuming more meat, dairy, and fish since their economic boom in the 1960s. This dietary contrast has had long-term effects on physical development, and height is one of the clearest indicators. Now let's address another stereotype, that most North Koreans have never eaten meat. That's an exaggeration. That may be close to the truth in poor rural areas. People in this region may eat as less as 10 kilograms per year, meaning less than a kilo per month. In bigger cities, especially in Pyongyang, people have access to more varied diets, like beef, pork, chicken, and eggs. When I studied in North Korea, I was very surprised to find that our dormitory meals included meat and eggs 3 times a day, and around Pyongyang there were plenty of cafés and restaurants which served bulgogi. It's when you grill the meat by yourself, and it was surprisingly affordable, around $2-7 depending on the place. Of course, we understand that people in Pyongyang consume more food than people in other regions, so let's discuss what actually people in rural areas eat. Their diet mostly consists of vegetables, corn and barley, but not rice. Although rice is a staple food across Asia, in North Korea, rice is considered a luxury. It requires reliable irrigation and stable electricity for farming equipment, both of which are lacking in North Korea. That's why barley and corn are much more common. Meanwhile, those living along the coasts often consume more seafood, and in recent years, wheat has become more common in the North Korean diet, thanks to large shipments from Russia. And now a little about the thing that usually comes to mind when speaking about Korean dishes: dogs. So if you're sensitive to this topic, please skip ahead. If you ask a Korean whether they eat dogs, be careful because this question might seriously offend someone from South Korea. In fact, just last year, the South Korean government passed a law banning the distribution and sale of dog-based products. Although the consumption is not criminalized, it's becoming increasingly rare. But what about North Korea? That's a different story. In North Korea, dog's meat is still considered a seasonal delicacy, especially during the hottest months of the year, like July and August. During this time, many restaurants offer special menus full of dog-based dishes, known in North Korea as dangogi, which literally means sweet meat.
우리 인민들이 단고기를 좋아합니다. 특히 이제 오늘 같은 초복날에는 더 많은 손님들이 식당을 찾아오고 있습니다.
It is believed that this name was given by Kim Il-sung, who was a true lover of Korean spicy dog soup called poshintan, and Kim Il-sung also once said, "Soup with dog meat is the sweetest and tastiest of all meat soups." It seems like soups made of dog's meat are even more popular in North Korea than traditional Korean soup of chicken and ginger, which is usually served in July and August and is considered to be very healthy. During dog meat season, TV and newspapers publish guidelines on the health benefits and cooking techniques of dogs' dishes. And it's not just elite restaurants, even regular eateries serve dog-based dishes during summer. North Korea's main newspaper, Rodon Sinmun, once reported that Pyongyang's dog meat restaurant offers over 70 different kinds of dog meat dishes. In 2015, the capital even hosted a national dog meat cooking contest. But what's behind this enthusiasm? In North Korea, there is a widespread belief that dog's meat enhances male fertility, making it especially popular among men. Like other meats, dog meat is rich in protein and is relatively low in cholesterol, so that's why enthusiasts believe that dog meat can cure all kinds of illnesses. There is even a proverb in North Korea saying, during dog meat season, even soup spills on your food is still medicine. However, I couldn't find any scientific evidence which supported the supposed medical benefits of dog meat. Life for ordinary North Koreans has never been easy. Many face limited freedoms and spend most of their time working hard trying to fulfill state-assigned tasks. But that doesn't mean that they do not know how to have fun. Leisure time in North Korea is not all about government parades and propaganda events. People there find ways to enjoy their weekends. What does fun actually look like there? Can North Koreans enjoy cafes, restaurants, and what about drinking culture? Of course, much of what I'm going to talk about from now applies mostly to big cities like Pyongyang, because this kind of fancy lifestyle is rare for rural areas. But in the capital, that's a different story. Pyongyang isn't just about traditional Korean dishes. The city offers a surprising variety of foreign cuisines like Western, Chinese, and even Japanese. There is even a German-style beer hall called Taedangan No. 1 restaurant and a sushi place owned by Kenji Fujimoto, the former personal chef of Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, big fans of Japanese cuisine. And anyone who can afford this restaurant is allowed to enjoy Japanese sushi there. I've been there myself with my friends and sushi there really were delicious. There are also karaoke-style restaurants where people eat, sing, and have a great time, a bit of a bohemian vibe for elite. But it wasn't always like this. Before the 1990s, going to a high-end restaurant was not something that anyone could do. Koreans needed a special access ticket, kind of a dining voucher. Wealthy people could buy them while others had to wait for work distribution or buy them secondhand from unofficial sellers. Same with alcohol. It was rationed and distributed only around national holidays or special events like weddings or funerals. This led many to start brewing their own homemade alcohol, like booze or samagon, with alcohol content ranging from 20 to 40 degrees. It was illegal, but still very common, a part of country's hidden informal economy. But today things have changed. North Koreans can buy alcohol from stores, markets, and drink freely. And honestly, what else is there to do when your movements are so restricted? If you haven't seen part 1 of this series yet, I explain the whole movement restriction things there. Plus, North Korean beer is actually really good. People sometimes ask me if it really lives up to the hype, and my answer is yes, it does.
Oh, this is one of the best beers I am having.
The beer is great.
Yes, this is good. Yeah.
I think it's better than Heineken.
So, the most famous brand of Korean beer is Taerangan beer, which is named after Pyongyang's main river. I even talked about that in my first video about bittersweet moments in Pyongyang, where I said that my favorite moment in North Korea was just sitting near Taedong River and sipping cold Taerangan beer. Such a vibe. So why North Korean beer is actually good? Well, in the early 2000s, North Korea bought an entire 175-year-old brewery from the United Kingdom, shipped it to Pyongyang, and rebuilt it with help from German brokers and Russian engineers. The result? Beer that actually tastes like good quality European lager. Now Taerangan Brewery makes 7 main beers, creatively called Taerangan 1, 2, 7. 5 of them are light lagers made from malt and rice, and 2 are darker beers. Taerangan 2 is probably the most popular one. There are other North Korean beer brands, but Taerangan is the most popular outside the country. Aside from beer, North Koreans also enjoy drinks like soju and makgeolli. In cities, there are plenty of so-called 술집, which literally means drinking or alcohol house, a kind of cozy Korean-style pubs. They are not bars in the Western sense, more like neighborhood spots where you can grab a drink and some snacks. So yes, North Koreans do know how to relax, party, and enjoy the weekends. There is even a phrase which is 추세게 빠지다, meaning descent into drunken debauchery. And one more thing, drinking in North Korea is said to be acceptable more for men than for women. Women in North Korea are usually expected to be reserved, but in Pyongyang it's not weird to see women out with friends, drinking soju or beer, and having fun at restaurants. Even the government now keeps an eye on drinking habits. Not long ago, Kim Jong-un slammed some party officials for binge drinking. Even the official newspaper, Rodon Sinmun, called them a rotten group and arrogant rebel who lost their ideological focus. So yes, North Koreans drink, they celebrate, and some of them even live it up in fancy-style karaoke restaurants. But as everything else in North Korea, it all depends on who you are and where you stand. So let's draw a conclusion. Are North Koreans starving, eating grass and dog soups? Not exactly. As I always say, the full picture is far more complex. Life in North Korea is hard. There are food shortages, seasonal hunger, and limited variety, especially in rural areas. Yes, people in North Korea really eat dogs, but not because they do not have anything else to eat, but just because they like it. And no, it's not only about suffering and silence in North Korea. People still manage to hang out, go to cafes and restaurants, drink, sing at karaoke as long as they can afford it. Things are not as straightforward as cliches suggest. Thank you for watching and see you next time.